Censorship, political dispute, and countless years of invisibility, the story of the first woman who not only painted and exhibited female nudes, but created one of the first political satire art in the 20th century in Colombia, until this day still fights her way within official art history books. To tell her story, it is impossible not to mention the story of what the country was living through at the time, as her life was embedded within one of the most violent moments of this nation's history. Débora Arango's insightful and thought-provoking paintings allowed women to express their own gaze for the first time, demystifying their roles as pure, virginal, maternal individuals to express their pain, struggles, rejection, devotion, pleasure, and joy in a way that had never been done before. Likewise, she observed and critically challenged the country's political circus and became one of Colombia's few artists devoted to political parody at the time. For these reasons, she was ostracized from the art world, constantly censored and rejected. She remained in the dark corners of history until 1980s, when her work started to gain some of the recognition she deserved. Still, we lack many more critical observations of her work to fully understand her contributions to Colombia's and the world's art history. Débora Arango was born on the 11th of November 1907 as the 8th of 14 children of Elvira Pérez and Castor Arango. Like many of the artists we have seen, she was born with great privilege. Her father traded with leather goods, allowing them to live quite comfortably in a spacious house in Medellin. In addition, her two brothers studied medicine, which became a key source of inspiration for her work, as we will see later. She was born only a few years after the end of one of Colombia's most prominent civil wars until that moment, called La Guerra de los Mil Días, the War of 1,000 Days. This conflict lasted 1,130 days and continued a tradition of bipartisan violence that would replicate throughout the 20th century. However, this war ended with the victory of the Conservative Party, which would rule until the 1930s, giving the country a small gap of time where the hatred between the two political parties remained repressed in the background. As a child, she suffered from paludism, aka malaria, which prevented her from receiving a traditional education. Although women at the time did not receive the same tutoring as men did, as their schooling included only subjects that would allow them to be better wives, such as knitting and sewing and cooking and nursing, etc., she was not able to finish that either due to the constant absences she had to endure because of her condition. Yet, during her time at the school Maria Auxiliadora of the Salesian Sisters, one of her teachers, the Italian sister Maria Rebacchia, saw her potential as an artist and painter. Therefore, when it was clear that she could not finish her education, she chose to devote herself exclusively to painting with the support of her family. At first, she was instructed by the artist Eladio Vélez, whose realist, naturalist style was inspired by the Italian Renaissance, having studied at the Academy of Rome, which, if you remember, was the school that Havana's Academy of San Alejandro was modeled after. And Académie Julian in Paris, where Tarsila Amaral studied 7 years earlier, which she then rejected. As Arango remembered later, she studied for 4 years at the Institute of Fine Arts Vélez directed. There, she studied portraiture and drawing. Still, she soon started to feel disenchanted by how he understood art, as it lacked emotion and fierceness that reflected what genuinely life was about. His idyllic and almost dull world started to annoy her, pushing her to find another tutor where she could find out how to express her emotions truly. I wanted not only to acquire the necessary ability to reproduce a model or any theme, but also to create and combine. I dreamt of making a work that was not limited to the inert, photographic accuracy of the classical school. She finally found the mentoring she sought in Vélez's travel companion in Europe, Pedronel Gómez. Unlike Vélez, Gómez was driven by social and political subject matters, having been born into a family of miners. Also, his way of depicting his models followed a more expressionistic approach, allowing the artist to portray his experience and his perspective of how he viewed the situation. Gómez has learned the fresco technique in Italy, becoming one of the few muralist painters in Colombia. Precisely one of his murals enamored Arango, as she finally saw an artist willing to show his own perception. His frescoes were among the first to depict nudes in a public building, portraying them in such a way that they emphasized the social struggle and therefore used as a form of complaint. For that reason, his work was also rejected by conservative members of the government, which found them too political and revolutionary. Likewise, the mayor requested that they would be covered as he found them immoral. Arango remembered, "One day I found what I was looking for. The frescoes of Pedronel Gómez revealed to me something that until then I did not know, something that I had not had the opportunity to understand. Gómez's revolutionary style opened a new and vast field of realization before me. It was 3 years of his intense learning work. At first, I cultivated the watercolor technique, and then I started in the end in the execution of nudes. It has been said that I have trained in nude painting under the direct tutelage of Maestro Pedronel Gómez. This is not accurate, because although I still consider myself a disciple of Pedronel, the truth is that all the nude studies I have done have been executed in my house following my own initiative. Pedronel's technique has powerfully influenced my style, but I have developed mine with my own themes following my personal inclinations." As we can read in her words, although Gómez was the one that showed her the importance of life drawing in the education of every artist, she was forced to study it on her own, at home, like it was the case for many female artists before her in Europe. Her fellow students frown upon her desire to study with live models, which they consider immoral for a female artist, leading them to reject her altogether and ban her from Gómez's studio. Only 1 or 2 of her friends stepped in to help her, like the artist Luz Hernandez, who had decided to become a nun and was willing to pose for her before she took the oath. As a result of their collaboration, Arango painted La Amiga, my female friend. To paint this picture, Arango had to glue several pieces of watercolor paper to create a life-size rendition of her model. This process was also used by the artist Carlos Correa, who continued to encourage her artistic practice despite her desire to depict female nudes. In this image, we observe Hernandez lying on a red blanket. The model is covered slightly by a white sheet that wraps a part of her leg but exposes her back and bottom. She rests quite comfortably as if asleep, allowing the viewer to feel her ease and placidness. Her life-size depiction permitted the audience to experience this feeling as if she was posing for them there and then. This large format was one of the elements that shocked the audience the most, making the models not just ideals, but actual individuals that could be right there standing next to us. Arango exhibited this image alongside another nude called Cantarina de la Rosa and the painting Sisters of Charity or Sisters of the Presentation for the first Salon of Professional Artists in the Club Union in Medellin. This last painting received the Salon's award of 100 pesos, $57 at the time, the equivalent of $1,200 today. This victory, alongside the fact that she exhibited this religious-themed painting next to her nudes, caused an uproar. The conservative media, supported by the Catholic Church, rejected her nudes as immoral and with poor taste. The fact that a woman was painting another woman was unspeakable, but more so because she showed them as tangible, unfantasized individuals. Similarly, artists like her former teacher, Eladio Vélez, were enraged that a woman he did not consider entirely professional had beaten him in the salon. He instigated the bishop to call her to stop her painting in such a way and explained to her that only male artists were allowed to paint nudes. In an interview she did shortly after the exhibition to respond to the attacks she had received, she stated, "Without life drawing practice, no ambitious artist devoted to his art can claim to have completed his work. Regarding the moral aspect they want to give to this kind of aesthetic manifestation, I don't understand what ethics have to do with them. My conscience is clear. And that's enough for me. Of course, I respect very much the concepts of certain people who have expressed their disapproval of me because I consider them sincere and well-inspired. I am convinced that art, as a manifestation of culture, has nothing to do with moral codes. Art is neither amoral or immoral. Its orbit does not intercept any ethical postulate." In her words, she not only rejected the alleged immoral allegations that the art world and society had made to her, but insisted that it is the right of every artist to be able to be well trained in their craft, which includes the mastery of life drawing. This is a method countless male artists before her had received to become proper masters in their work. How could a woman be evaluated similarly if they were not allowed to receive the same education? How could they compete with their male artists if they lacked the fundamental elements of their training? Arango emphatically rebelled against this disposition. She knew that for her to become the professional artist she wanted to be, she had to be trained in the same way as her male colleagues, even if she had to take matters into her own hands and request the help of her family and friends to find models that would pose for her at home. Likewise, with her brother's help, she could study anatomy in the morgues of the hospitals they worked in, allowing her to develop her training, even if it had to be done in an unorthodox way. As she stated in her interview, it was a fundamental aspect of the trade, and therefore, despite the complaints, she would not stop in her pursuit and would continue to paint multiple nudes in the years to come. Until then, only a few artists had exhibited nude paintings in Colombia. During the 19th century, the artist Epifanio Garay was the only one that showcased this technique in his work The Levite's Concubine, which represents the horrific biblical story where a Levite sent his concubine to be ravishly raped by a mob who wanted to violate him instead. Although the story does not mention her nakedness after she endured this terrible crime, the artist portrayed her emphasizing her voluptuous and sensuous features, reflecting not just his mastery, which probably took hours of passively sitting by the model, but inviting the gaze of the audience who would probably find pleasure in the way it was depicted. Her teacher, Pedro Nel Gomez, was another who showcased naked human figures in the early 20th century, using them to portray the painful work endured by the miners in Colombia, accumulating several bodies to emphasize the tensions and distress. Arango's work transgressed the previous canon completely. Her subsequent life drawings after the debated Salon exhibition of 1939 included pictures where she showcased the complete anatomy of the female figure, including depictions of abundant pubic hair and models that challenged the viewer's gaze by staring directly at them. A great example is her painting Mountains, Montañas, which could be seen as a response to the 1891 painting The Hunter of the Andes by the Mexican artist Felipe Santiago Gutiérrez, who founded the Gutiérrez Academy in Colombia in the 19th century. In his work, the model is depicted lying on the field with a backdrop of mountains and pastures. The hunter lies naked with her skin perfectly illuminated and perfected to prevent blemishes or imperfections. He removes the pubic hair as if she was just a child, reflecting on her virginal nature. On the contrary, Arango's painting focuses on the relationships between landscape and the model in front. She mimics the pose of her model with the mountains behind her. She presents her as a full-grown woman with abundant pubic hair and wide hips, letting the viewer know she is well past her childbearing age. She lies comfortably on a white sheet with a pillow under her head as if she's not bothered to enjoy her naked body in the open air pleasantly. In my opinion, art has nothing to do with morality. A nude is nothing but nature without disguises, as it is, as the artist should see it. A nude is a landscape in human flesh. Life, with all its admirable force, can never be appreciated among hypocrisy and the concealment of the high social strata. This is why my subjects are complex, pungent, and almost barbaric. This is why they baffle people who want to make life and nature what they are not. The rough and violent scenes moved me. That is why I painted the slaughterers. I like nature in all its splendor. That's why I paint landscapes and nudes. That is why I'm not immoral. Consequently, Arango's choice to depict her models with all their flaws and imperfections was a political decision to show the truth and highlight the grandeur of raw, unfantasized nature. Likewise, her work depicted for the first time the struggles and abuses the female body endures daily and the importance of telling their stories. We can observe this decision in her work Frine or Trafficking from 1940, which she exemplified the cost of beauty in Colombian society. During the early 20th century, it was calculated that there was one prostitute for every 40 men in Medellin. In 1928, there were over 800 brothels in the city, becoming a popular place for male enjoyment. Arango cleverly used the story of the Greek daughter of Epicles, Frine, who was celebrated for her charm and beauty, to critique how a woman of her attractiveness might have been treated during her time. In ancient Greek times, Frine was often used as the model of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, by the artist Praxiteles. She was accused of profanity and was defended by Hyperides, who revealed her breast to the judges to awaken compassion, allowing her to be released and pardoned. In Arango's painting, the model is also forced to display her breast, but this time to a group of men selling her to be used and enjoyed by others. This time, Frine's beauty was not a symbol of sympathy and kind-heartedness, but a commodity used by the individuals that view her more as an object than anything else. In the image, another woman is seen in the background with her hand on her mouth, as if she cannot endure the treatment Frine is receiving. To portray the actual behavior of her society and depict the reality behind the idyllic facade that the other artists represented, she had to witness firsthand what was happening around her. Hence, she started rising early in the morning, and with any excuse she can think of, she would venture into the sordid brothels and bars to sketch the portraits of the individuals coming out of them. Likewise, she visited prisons, care homes, mental institutions, and hospitals that, with the help of her doctor brothers, allowed her full access. One of her visits to the mental institution, she heard a woman in her cell. She only saw her briefly, but the image lingered in her mind. She depicted her in her painting Schizophrenia in the Asylum of 1940 with life-size proportions. The patient observed the spectator with what appears to be a smile, with her legs and arms wide open, as if inviting the viewer to touch her. Her nipples appear profoundly visible through her dress, and her pelvic area, covered slightly by her skirt, suggests that it would be entirely revealed if we were to linger longer. Behind her, there are images of naked women and couples embracing, suggesting that this so-called mental affliction that she might have had, she was in fact the fact that she might have been open about her sexuality or might have been gender fluid. At the time, homosexuality was still considered and treated as a mental affliction that needed to be corrected and healed. Arango depicts this woman as if the bars containing her were no longer there, and she was both welcoming and challenging the viewer standing in front of her. The last nude of this period we will study in this video is called Nude or Apples of Paradise. This gigantic watercolor painting measuring 52 by 182 centimeters depicts a woman lying on the floor looking at the ceiling, enjoying the pleasure of her body. Just like she did with her previous nudes, she showcases the fullness of her anatomy, including her abundant pubic hair. One hand is placed on her leg close to her pelvic area and the other is touching her nipples with her fingers. She has rosy cheeks and her pupils appear to be dilating, representing the delight she's feeling. Arango includes 5 apples behind her, one that seems to be bitten to parody the fruit that made humanity fall, while they were in paradise to confront it with the power a woman has to satisfy her own sexual needs. Although everything that I just mentioned is my interpretation of her painting, it is impossible not to see the significance of this painting in the conservative Colombian society at the time. Imagine facing this enormous, almost 2-meter long painting of a woman's sexual joy. Back then, it was imaginable for a woman to reflect and represent other women, and even worse, to express their right to have pleasure. This gesture invited the audience to question how much we lose when we allow only one gender to control desire. Do we fall, as the Bible suggested, or is this just a myth to permit only one side's rule over the power to enjoy ourselves? In our next chapter, releasing in 2 weeks, we will dive into Débora Arango's bold political satire and how her work stood at the heart of the clash between conservatives and liberals that led to El Bogotazo. Subscribe to our channel to get notified about new episodes and explore more groundbreaking Latin American artists through our free masterclasses and podcasts.